Today, we welcome you to the installation of another remarkable artifact in the museum collections. We have a short two-part program we're going to do. Part one, we want to talk a little bit about the original knife. Shelley Crittenden, our collections manager, is going to do that. Secondarily, we have a master knife maker from Tennessee, Greg Wall, who has made an educational replica for us that is just absolutely stunning. How he did this from photographs and measurements, I don't know, but it's remarkable. Over the years, the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum has gotten phenomenal pieces. You can just look around this gallery and down the hallway and see it. One of the pieces we have that was given to us is this 1851 portrait of Jack Hayes. That's one of the first professional paintings done in California in 1851 in the middle of the gold rush, when he, as a famous Texas Ranger, led people out to California. Down the hall, we have a painting of Sam Houston that we dedicated last year after the restoration was provided by a private donor. Sam Houston said it was the likeness of himself that he most appreciated. Today, we're bringing in we brought in a amazing Bowie knife that has a phenomenal history. The people that have donated these things have realized that these items have a value besides simple dollar value. When you look at all the TV programs on antiques and everything else, the first question that comes out of people's mouths often is, what's it worth, not what's its importance. Well, in this place, we talk about its importance. The material here will never go on the market. It doesn't belong to a private board or a private individual. It belongs to you, the people of Texas. All of this material is public property, and we are proud to be the people who are charged with curating this material. Today, one of the reasons we wanted to do this little installation is for the donor, Mr. Gleichman, Rudolph Gleichman of Pennsylvania. Mr. Gleichman gave us this Bowie knife. Unfortunately, he could not be with us here today. He's over 90 years of age, but he wanted to make sure, as he was looking at the things he had in his personal collection, that they all found good homes where they would appreciate it. Thanks to him, this Bowie knife, which originated in Texas, has returned to Texas, and we are tremendously grateful. About 40 years ago, he bought it. He spent over 10 years researching it, and its history indicates that it was a knife presented by his brother after he died at the Alamo, Jim Bowie's brother, Rezin P. Bowie, to a Texas Ranger named Captain William Y. Lacey sometime around 1838. So the history behind this is remarkable. Our collections manager, Shelley Crittenden, is now going to tell you a little bit about this knife. As we do this, we would like to have a presentation photograph here. If I could ask the Texas Rangers who are here, Major Lane and the rest of the Texas Rangers, to come up front here. And Shelley, we want to basically provide a photograph of this knife being given on behalf of Mr. Gleichman to the people of Texas and the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. Thank you, folks. Shelley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Y'all are going to have to bear with me. I think I swallowed a frog this weekend. Byron already covered a little bit about the history of Mr. Gleichman. I think he said he lives in Hershey, Pennsylvania. He acquired this knife, interesting enough, in the parking lot outside of a gun show from a picker. He said he bought it in about 1982 for about $400. And as Byron mentioned, he did about 10 years worth of research and determined that, within all that he could determine, that this knife really did belong to Ranger William Young Lacey. William Young Lacey was born in Kentucky in 1814. He came to Texas in 1830 and rode with Jim Bowie. He was commissioned into the Corps of Rangers from May of 1836 to December of 1837. After his ranger service, Sam Houston sent him to Nacogdoches and Houston counties to form militia companies. He reportedly received the knife from Rezin Bowie in appreciation for his loyalty and service alongside Jim Bowie, his brother, at a time when Jim Bowie's reputation was in question after his death at the Alamo. At the age of 30, Jim Bowie made the Bowie knife famous in the famous knife fight known as the Sandbar Duel, which was fought in 1827 near Natchez, Mississippi. After that fight became famous, Bowie knives were all the rage, and everyone wanted one in the West. The Bowie knives typically came from factories in Sheffield, England, and Solingen, Germany, and they were turned out by the thousands during the 1830s and 40s. As you can imagine, a lot of those came to Texas, and there were even, this is hard to imagine in this day and age, but there were even knife fighting classes that happened when people would receive these Bowie knives. Jim's brother, Rezin Bowie, Rezin Pleasant Bowie, presented knives to a number of acquaintances, among them the governor of Louisiana and a Lieutenant Fowler of the U.S. Dragoons. Now, some of you, if you've been to the Alamo, that knife is actually on display at the Alamo, and is fairly similar to the one that we have in the engraving style. So the engraving on another knife that was given to actor Edwin Forrest is similar to our knife, and all the knives differ in design, supporting the theory and the family assertion that Rezin Bowie did not make the knives but selected them and may have supervised their manufacture. The Bowie knife as we know it is based on 16th century European hunting knives with the addition of a crossguard and clipped point. So, and if you think about the way you would have used a Bowie knife back in those days, that crossguard would have come very handy to protect your hand. The engraving is actually on this part of the knife, or on the scabbard of the knife, and it simply says, R.P. Bowie to Captain William Y. Lacey. And Rezin Bowie is credited as being the father of the Bowie knife. In doing some background research for this little presentation, I Googled, as most everyone does these days, Bowie knife, or interesting facts about the Bowie knife. And that brought up this quote from a 1988 issue of Texas Monthly. And this kind of demonstrates the importance and the romance that goes along with the Bowie knife and its importance in the history of the American West. This is a quote from Susan Chadwick. She says, the Bowie knife lives as a symbol of passionate times, when men were bold and brave and easily offended. They killed for their honor, hunted their food, and dealt personally with cheaters, murderers, angry Indians, and bears, and that's just a partial list. There was a lot of fighting going on, forged by the demands of survival on the southwestern frontier. The Bowie knife has a significance in the evolution of American weapons comparable to that of the Kentucky rifle and the Colt revolver, all of which we're in the presence of here today. And she goes on further to say, almost any Texan can summon up a nightmarish image of its huge and shining form with a sharpened upper edge specially designed for ripping out the guts of an adversary. So I think that's kind of spoken like a true Texan. So I'm going to hand this back over to Byron.
Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Greg Wall and his associate Mark Keyes. Shortly after we received the gift of this Bowie knife, it hit the national news. There were literally articles in it all the way from the Boston Globe out to the San Francisco Examiner, and we were just amazed by the interest that people have in this part of Texas history. One of the contacts that Shelley received was from Greg, who is a master knife maker from Tennessee. He's also, interestingly enough, a distant descendant of the Bowie family. And he has had a lifelong interest in the Bowie knife and its lore and history. Well, Greg offered two things. Number one, he offered to make an educational replica of this knife. And we were expecting something that would be pretty good, and we were just blown away by the quality and the facsimile quality of it. The other thing he offered to do, because of the coming 200th anniversary of the Rangers, was to see if we wanted to do a licensed version of the knife that people could buy as a collectible. And he is working on that, and we're negotiating that at this point in time. But we thought that we would ask Greg out to talk a little bit about how do you replicate a 180-year-old knife with techniques and whatnot that have pretty much faded away in many cases. So without more ado, I'm going to turn this over to Greg and ask him to tell us a little bit about his process.
Good morning. Thank y'all for coming out. First, I'd want to thank Byron and Shelley for giving me the opportunity to make this knife. It was an honor and a pleasure to do so. The good Lord has blessed me with the ability to make knives. It's something I enjoy to do, and it's it's just a pleasure to be able to make these type knives and to put them into people's hands. This all came about when I had seen the article about the Lacey Bowie being donated to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. I knew who Rezin Bowie was because about 3 years earlier, I had inherited some pictures in an old trunk. And one of those pictures was 4 generations of grandmothers. One of the grandmothers was Sarah Matilda Bowie. So as a knife maker, that really piqued my interest because I'd been making knives for about 5 years at that time. Through the research of Ancestry.com, it became apparent that Rezin Bowie and Jim Bowie were cousins. So that was kind of what hooked me into wanting to make this replica knife. So I contacted Mark Keys, and within just a few days, we had an invitation to come and visit the knife here at Waco. Byron gave us free rein on the knife. We were able to photograph it and document it. The knife itself is what you see here. So and I really can't explain how I get there. It's just from the patterns and the eye. There's nothing straight on this knife except the hilt. So it is a difficult knife to produce, which it's amazing that this knife was made in the 1800s because I knew that it was a very difficult knife. And the Lacey Bowie, the original, is a very excellent knife as far as balance, and it would have been a real tool for Captain Lacey to have on his side, for sure. There is a few other folks that need to be mentioned. The engraving on my knife was done by Ryan Edmondson of Princeton, Texas, and the sheath work was done by Gideon Yoder of Stantonville, Tennessee. I would like to, it's been my pleasure to make this knife and to donate it to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to sharing this with the public now, and we really appreciate it. I wanted to thank the folks that have made time out of their schedules to come here. First of all, Major Lane, Lieutenant I'm sorry, my James Thomas, my mind is going on Monday morning and everything else. Matt Coffin, retired lieutenant, Texas Rangers. Representatives from the city of Waco who basically sponsor this museum for the state of Texas. Our council member Jim Holmes, Wiley Stem, city manager, Bradley Ford, assistant city manager, council member Andrea Barfield, thank you very much for coming today. And do we have any members of the Historical Commission here? Yes, we do. Thank you, gentlemen, for making the time to do this. So it's an asset for everybody in Texas. And again, thank you for coming here and helping us prepare something that we can get to Mr. Gleichman to thank him for his generosity.
Hi, I'm Bob Duvall. I'm here in Waco in the beautiful Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum. My favorite role in my career was Augustus Gray in the Lonesome Dove series, and I've gained a great respect for the Texas Rangers, and I'm sure that when you come, you will find what I find here. Gus and Woodrow would have really liked this place.